There exists within the human spirit a profound mystery that has long been overlooked by the clamor of modern life. Beneath the surface of speech and gesture lies a hidden current, an ancient river of connection that requires no words to flow. When we see children who seem to know what others feel without being told, when we witness them exchanging glances that carry entire worlds of understanding, we are glimpsing something older than language, older than history itself. This silent language of the psyche is not a phenomenon to be dismissed as mere imagination. It is a living truth that pulses beneath the surface of consciousness, waiting to be recognized. Children embody this truth most clearly because they remain unbound by the heavy chains of disbelief that adulthood forges have not yet been convinced that only what is visible is real. They move with a natural trust in what they sense, but cannot measure, in what they feel, but cannot define. When one child knows the sorrow of another without a single tear being shed, or when laughter erupts simultaneously from two hearts before a word is spoken, it is not chance, it is the psyche speaking in its primal tongue, a language without grammar, flowing like a river beneath the structures of thought. The silent language of the psyche reveals that consciousness does not end at the border of the body. It extends outward, reaching, touching, blending. To experience this is to realize that we are not contained within our skin, nor trapped within our minds. We are part of a web, each thread vibrating when touched by another. Telepathic children remind us of this truth not by attempting to prove it, but by living it so effortlessly that it becomes undeniable. They are mirrors reflecting a possibility we have forgotten, an ability that still resides within us, but has been dulled by the noise of doubt. In the modern world, communication is often reduced to transaction. Words exchanged like coins, efficiency valued over depth. But the silent language of the psyche is not transactional. It is transformational. It does not seek to inform, but to unite. When a child feels the sadness of a friend across the room, there is no exchange of information in the ordinary sense. Rather, there is a communion of souls. This is not about knowing the details of thought, but about merging with the essence of another's being. It is as if the walls between inner worlds grow thin and light passes through, illuminating what is shared at the deepest level. The existence of this silent language forces us to reconsider the nature of thought itself. We are taught that thoughts belong solely to the thinker, that they are private whispers inside the skull. Yet if children can sense them without a word being spoken, perhaps thoughts are not contained, but radiated like vibrations from a struck string. Perhaps the psyche is less a chamber of secrets and more a resonant field that extends beyond the body, touching others, shaping their awareness, and being shaped in return. To embrace this is to realize that we are far less separate than we have believed. The barriers we cling to, my mind, your mind, my emotions, your emotions, begin to dissolve when we see that what we feel be carried outward, received by others who are open enough to sense it. Children, in their openness, reveal this with startling clarity. Their telepathic connections are not miracles in the sense of violating nature. They are miracles in the sense of revealing nature's hidden depths. This silent language is also a reminder that the psyche has many layers. On the surface, we speak with words, we explain, we justify. Beneath that surface lies a vast sea of intuition, imagery, and resonance that requires no sound. To learn the silent language is not to abandon speech, but to remember that there are deeper channels of connection, streams of knowing that run parallel to the spoken word. The children who display telepathy are simply fluent in a tongue we have neglected, a language we once knew instinctively but have long forgotten. The implications of this are vast. If we are truly able to sense and transmit meaning without words, then the very foundations of human interaction shift. Trust takes on a new dimension, for we can no longer hide entirely behind masks. Empathy becomes not an effort of imagination, but a natural extension of shared experience. Conflict, too, changes shape, for how can one remain hardened against another when their pain reverberates within your own soul? The silent language of psyche challenges us to be more authentic, more present, and more aware of the unseen bonds that hold us together. Children show us this language not through theory, but through being. They do not debate its existence, they live it, and in witnessing them, we are called to remember what we once knew as children ourselves. We are invited to step beyond the noise of doubt and the prison of rational limits into a space where connection is felt directly, where words are no longer the sole vessels of meaning, and where consciousness itself reveals its greater expanse. The silent language of the psyche is not the future of humanity, it is its origin, and its rediscovery marks the beginning of a new awareness, one that reframes not only communication, but the very nature of what it means to be human. When we look upon children who seem to share thoughts without speaking, who appear to sense emotions without being told, we are not merely observing a curious trick of the mind. What we are witnessing is the stirring of something ancient, the rising of unseen archetypes that dwell beneath the surface of consciousness. These archetypes are not inventions of the individual, but eternal patterns that exist beyond time and culture, shaping our inner lives and appearing through dreams, myths, and sudden flashes of intuition. When children reveal telepathic tendencies, they are not inventing something new, but reawakening something humanity has always carried within itself. They remind us that consciousness is not simply personal, but deeply collective, reaching into layers of reality that remain hidden from the eye, yet are alive in the soul. The unseen archetypes are like subterranean rivers running beneath the land of the mind. On the surface, we build our societies, our schools, and our systems of thought, believing that all meaning is created through reason and language, yet beneath that surface, the rivers move silently, carrying symbols, images, and truths that unite us across cultures and generations. Telepathic children draw from these rivers instinctively. Their ability to know without being told, to feel without explanation, is a reflection of how deeply connected we all are within these archetypal waters. It is not a miracle of biology alone, but a reminder of the profound unity of the human psyche. The archetypes themselves emerge in many forms. They are the shared symbols that echo across myths of distant civilizations. The universal patterns of the hero, the mother, the shadow, the guide, they appear in dreams, in art, in the stories we tell without ever having learned them from another. When children connect telepathically, we are seeing these archetypes not as abstract ideas, but as living forces moving through human experience. The unspoken understanding between them is a manifestation of the archetype of union, the symbol of deep connection that lies at the heart of humanity's longing to belong and to be known. In their silent communion, these children reveal that archetypes are not confined to myth or story, but breathe within the very structure of consciousness. This revelation forces us to reconsider how we define the mind. If thoughts can leap across silence, feelings can be transmitted without words, then consciousness is not locked within the individual. Instead, it is shaped and guided by unseen forces that stretch across time, binding us into a collective existence. The unseen archetypes remind us that we are not separate entities wandering alone, but expressions of patterns much larger than ourselves. Telepathic children do not create the archetype of connection. They embody it, bringing it into the present moment in a way that cannot be ignored. The presence of these archetypes is also a mirror for our cultural amnesia. In the rush of modern life, in the relentless pursuit of technology and control, humanity has forgotten the depth of its own inner world. We have come to believe that only what can be measured is real and only what can be seen is true. Yet when a child reveals knowledge that could not have been spoken, when they reflect the unspoken sorrow or joy of another, we are forced to remember what has been forgotten. The archetypes remind us that truth does not reside solely in data, but also in symbols, not solely in logic, but also in resonance. They whisper to us through the actions of these children that the human mind has depths we have only begun to explore. It is not only wonder that these unseen archetypes bring, but also responsibility. If consciousness is shared, if our inner world is connected to others through invisible patterns, then what we harbor within ourselves has consequences beyond our private lives. A thought of compassion can ripple outward, but so too can a thought of bitterness. Telepathic children are living examples of this reality, for they feel what others carry even when it is not spoken. Their presence reveals the weight of our unacknowledged emotions and challenges us to tend to our inner world with greater care. To recognize the archetypes is to recognize that we are not isolated, but part of a living fabric, and our integrity within that fabric matters deeply. The unseen archetypes also offer a path forward. They are not merely relics of the past, but guides for the future, showing us possibilities for human connection that transcend the limits of speech and separation. The archetype of the messenger, the archetype of the healer, the archetype of the visionary, all these live within the human soul, waiting for expression. Telepathic children embody these possibilities, suggesting that humanity may one day remember how to live with deeper awareness of its shared mind. Their presence does not only reframe how we think about children, but reframes consciousness itself, pointing toward a future where the boundaries between self and other grow thinner, and the patterns of unity rise to the surface. When we see these archetypes revealed through the lives of children, we are not only seeing what they can do, but also who we truly are. We are creatures of depth, woven together by invisible designs, carrying within us a heritage of symbols that bind us to one another. The children are not anomalies, but reminders. They call us back to the hidden rivers, to the unseen structures of meaning that lie beneath the surface of our lives. In their telepathy, we glimpse the archetype of communion rising once more, offering us not just curiosity, but transformation, not just spectacle, but the possibility of rediscovering the wholeness we have long forgotten. Whenever a mystery rises before humanity, the first instinct is not always reverence, but hesitation. What unsettles us also fascinates us, and what fascinates us may awaken both fear and awe in equal measure. The phenomenon of children who appear to communicate without words, who seem to share thoughts or emotions as if the boundaries between them were thin as paper, strikes at the heart of this paradox. On one hand, there is wonder, a sense of marvel at the hidden capacities of consciousness. On the other, there is fear, a trembling before the possibility that we are not as private, not as separate, not as contained as we believed ourselves to be. This keynote turns to that tension, the shadow of fear and the light of wonder, and examines how it shapes our response to telepathic children and what it reveals about our own inner worlds. The shadow of fear emerges first because it confronts the fragile illusions we have built around individuality. We are taught to believe that our minds are in impenetrable sanctuaries, that thoughts belong only to the thinker, and that emotions can be masked, hidden, and controlled. Yet the existence of children who sense what others feel or know what others think destabilizes this assumption. If the mind is not a fortress but a field, then its walls are not as strong as we imagined. Fear rises here because the shadow exposes what we conceal, our unspoken judgments, our private sorrows, our hidden longings. To imagine another perceiving these without permission can feel like exposure, as though the veil of secrecy that protects us from one another is being stripped away. But fear always points towards something deeper. And in this case, it points toward the possibility of radical honesty. If our inner world radiates outward, if children can feel it without explanation, then we must reckon with what we carry inside. The shadow of fear insists that we face not only the thoughts we wish to broadcast, but also those we would prefer to bury. This confrontation with our own hidden selves is uncomfortable, yet it is the necessary threshold before entering the light of wonder. Fear is the guardian at the gate of transformation, asking whether we are ready to see ourselves as we truly are, without masks or pretenses. Once we move through that fear, a new horizon opens, one filled with wonder. For if telepathy is real, if consciousness can reach across the space between people, then human connection is more profound than we have allowed ourselves to believe. The light of wonder comes from realizing that we are not isolated monologues, but interconnected dialogues, part of a vast symphony of awareness. The laughter of a child that sparks in another without a word, the shared sense of joy or sorrow that leaps across silence, these moments illuminate the depth of our unity. Wonder here is not a fleeting thrill, but a recognition that the human spirit is built for communion, for resonance, for sharing not only words, but being itself. Children embody this wonder with a natural ease because they have not yet built the rigid barriers of adulthood. They live closer to the raw truth of connection, sensing instinctively what we have learned to doubt. Their telepathic exchanges remind us of the porousness of the psyche, of the way consciousness seeps outward, blending with others like colors merging on a canvas. In their presence, we are invited to drop the armor of skepticism and allow ourselves to feel what has always been true, that to be human is to be connected at a level deeper than speech. The light of wonder shines brightest when we recognize that these children are not anomalies, but harbingers of what lies within us all, capacities that have been muted but not extinguished. The dance between fear and wonder is not one to be resolved but embraced. Fear alerts us to the responsibilities of such connection, while wonder awakens us to its possibilities. To sense another's thoughts or emotions is to carry the burden of greater empathy, for one can no longer pretend not to know. It is to live with heightened awareness of how our inner states affect those around us. And it is to accept the weight of compassion that comes from knowing another's suffering directly. Yet within this burden lies a gift. For what is compassion, if not the bridge between fear and wonder? Compassion transforms fear into responsibility and wonder into action. The shadow of fear also serves another purpose. It protects the mystery from being taken lightly. Without fear, wonder risks becoming mere entertainment, a spectacle to be consumed rather than a revelation to be honored. The trembling we feel in the face of telepathic children is not a weakness, but a recognition of the sacred. It reminds us that consciousness is not something to be exploited or trivialized, but something to be approached with reverence. The fear we feel is the echo of awe, the recognition that we are standing before a mystery larger than ourselves, a mystery that demands humility. In this interplay, we find the true essence of the human response to the extraordinary. Fear ensures that we do not rush recklessly into the unknown, while wonder ensures that we do not retreat entirely into denial. Together, they create a tension that propels us forward into greater awareness. Telepathic children embody this tension in living form. They confront us with the shadow by exposing the illusion of separation, and they uplift us with the light by showing us the reality of deeper connection. They are both unsettling and inspiring, both a challenge and a gift, holding within them the paradox that growth always demands. The shadow of fear and the light of wonder are not opposites to be chosen between, but partners in the unfolding of consciousness. Fear calls us to honesty, to responsibility, to the courage of facing our hidden selves. Wonder calls us to openness, to the joy of discovering that we are not alone. In their union lies the path forward, a path where humanity can begin to embrace the full spectrum of its inner capacities. And in the children who embody telepathy, we see the living symbols of that path. Reminders that every fear is the threshold of wonder, and every wonder carries the shadow that makes it sacred. To speak of the future is always to step into the realm of uncertainty, yet within uncertainty lies the seed of possibility. When we consider the phenomenon of children who seem to connect telepathically, who share emotions or thoughts without the scaffolding of words, we are not merely looking at curious anomalies, but at glimpses of what human connection could become. These children, whether we name them visionaries or simply sensitive souls, are living signs of a shift in consciousness. They remind us that our current ways of relating, so heavily dependent on speech, technology, and external tools, may not be the limit of our capacities. Instead, they suggest that humanity stands on the threshold of remembering what it has always known, that we are bound together by threads of awareness too subtle for the eye, but too powerful to deny. The future of human connection will not be built solely through machines or networks of wires and signals, as astonishing as those have been. It will not be measured only in the speed of our communication or the reach of our devices. The true future lies in rediscovering the deeper networks that already exist, the psychic bonds that link one consciousness to another beneath the surface of language. Children who appear to exchange thoughts without speaking point toward this reality. They are like early blossoms of a season not yet in full bloom, offering a preview of the possibilities waiting for us if we choose to cultivate them. Imagine a world where connection is not limited to the spoken word, but includes direct resonance of thought and feeling. Such a world would transform the very nature of human interaction. Misunderstanding would not vanish, but its terrain would shift, for communication would no longer rely exclusively on the imperfect translation of inner experience into words, and instead meaning would pass more directly through resonance rather than representation. The silence between people would become alive with presence, and relationships would deepen because connection would not depend solely on what is said, but on what is shared at the level of being itself. This future also carries profound implications for empathy. In today's world, empathy is often cultivated through imagination. We try to place ourselves in the position of another to feel what they might feel, though our efforts are imperfect. If telepathic resonance becomes more widely acknowledged, empathy may no longer be a matter of effort, but of direct perception. To know another's sorrow without them uttering a word, to feel another's joy as if it were your own, is to be drawn into an ethical closeness that cannot easily be ignored. Such a shift could foster a culture where compassion is not optional but inevitable, where indifference becomes harder to sustain because the pain or delight of others is felt within one's own psyche. Of course, this vision of the future is not without its challenges. The ability to sense another's thoughts or feelings raises questions of privacy, of boundaries, of the need for discernment. Just as language can be used to heal or to wound, telepathic connection could be used with grace or with harm. The future of human connection then will demand a new kind of maturity, one that recognizes that the inner world is not an isolated possession but part of a shared field. Responsibility will grow alongside capacity, and humanity will need to learn how to honor the intimacy of this form of communication without exploiting it. Yet these challenges are not reasons for dismissal, they are signs of growth. Every new stage of human awareness carries with it the need for greater wisdom. When fire was discovered, it brought warmth and nourishment, but also destruction if misused. When language emerged, it allowed for the sharing of knowledge, but also for the weaving of deceit. The same will be true of telepathic connection. If it becomes more consciously embraced, it will demand ethical frameworks, spiritual grounding, and practices of respect, but it will also open pathways toward a depth of unity we can scarcely imagine now. The children who reveal these possibilities serve as our teachers. They remind us that the future is not entirely ahead of us, but also within us, waiting to be remembered. Their presence suggests that telepathic resonance is not a mutation or a novelty, but an ancient capacity dimmed by centuries of neglect. In their natural ease with this form of connection, they embody a future where humanity is less fractured, less estranged, and more attuned to the currents of the collective psyche. They show us that the next horizon is not about reaching farther into the stars, but about reaching deeper into the invisible bonds that unite us here on Earth. The future of human connection, then, is not about discarding language or technology, but about integrating them with deeper modes of knowing. Words will remain powerful, devices will continue to extend our reach, but beneath them, both will run the silent current of shared consciousness. This current, once acknowledged, could transform education, relationships, communities, and even global cooperation. A society attuned to shared thought and feeling would have less room for deception and division, for the very act of hiding would become more difficult. Instead, authenticity could flourish, and trust could deepen, not as abstract ideals, but as lived realities. The unfolding of this future will not happen all at once. It will be gradual, uneven, and at times resisted by those who cling to the safety of separation. But the seeds are already visible in who display these gifts. They are not outliers, but pioneers, carrying within them the blueprint of what is possible. Their telepathy reframes consciousness not as a solitary island, but as part of a living continent, vast and interconnected. They invite us to imagine not only what we might become as individuals, but what we might create together as a species when connection itself becomes our greatest inheritance.